I'm telling you, it's the biggest problem. And what does religion do? It says that my God is better than your God. And my God will kill your God. And not only that, my God tells me that if you're a pagan or a heathen, or if you're you're what?
Non-believer.
A non-believer, then you shouldn't even be in the conversation. Can you believe? I mean, this is, so people don't, can there be peace between the Israelis and the Palestinians? What's the source of this? That somebody believes that they're better than other people. Who can say that? That's not an African concept. That doesn't come anywhere out of the epistemology of ancient Africa. It doesn't come out of the cradle that Dr. Dove was talking about, that Joke talked about. No, that's not an African thing. Who talks about this hierarchy? Some people are higher than others because of color and physical types. That's stupid stuff. But it's a stupid stuff that is based fundamentally on the religions that people attach themselves to. So I have very little to say about that.
Okay, just to add to what Dr. Asante is saying, importantly, culture needs to be defined from an Afrocentric perspective, because culture from a European perspective is racialized. So there's the superior culture, the white culture, and the inferior black culture. And Sheikh Anta Diop, in writing the book The African Origin, dismisses the lunacy of this idea. But, our position is not that race doesn't exist. Racism does exist, the construct does exist in the minds of people who make it real. So we're not trying to say it doesn't exist. What we're trying to say is that we have to begin a new way of looking at it, because it is the mind that creates the culture and the culture that creates the mind. In the Eurocentric idea of culture, the mind doesn't really play a role. But in the African idea of culture, the mind is absolutely key, because the mind is attached to the heart and the soul of humanity. So that is where the work begins. The battle is actually for the mind. And, so it's a cultural construct. The creation of race is a cultural construct. It comes out of the northern cradle and the belief in hierarchy. So we wanted to show that clearly in the book, and to show how culture works to define who we think we are. So the reason for us thinking that we're inferior and so on, I'm a privileged person. I'm African, but I'm privileged based on the color of my skin. And I use my privilege in the best way that I can, because I'm an African. What is happening is that the mind is the place that is attacked in the Pan-European Academy, that where Africology as a discipline arises. It is the only discipline that is not racist. Every other discipline is racist because it believes in the inferiority of Africa and African people. So there's a thing called theory of evolution, which is that we came from monkeys, and then we left Africa, and all the people that stayed in Africa were ignorant, and the people that left Africa became civilized, the whiter they became. So that is really fundamental to all these disciplines. Not only that, but they received funds from the blood of African people being enslaved and colonized. So, there are these aspects of the Pan-European Academy that we're all being taught that are culturally affirmed. So it's very difficult for African people, dark-skinned African people, to appreciate and love what is being said about them us inside the academy, because the truth is that Africa is the start. All our ancestors are African, all our ancestors are black. But we've been taught to believe the opposite, to believe that our ancestors were uncivilized. But actually, all the first civilizations of humanity came out of Africa.
When you claim your Africanness, you're going to get your mind back. Black and I'm proud. Black and I'm proud. When you claim your Africanness, you're going to get your mind back. Black and I'm proud. Claim your Africanness. Black and I'm proud. I'm telling you. When you claim your Africanness, you're going to get your mind back. Black and I'm proud. Claim your Africanness. Black and I'm proud. I'm telling you. When you claim your Africanness, you're going to get your mind back. Black and I'm proud. Claim your Africanness. Black and I'm proud. I'm telling you. Become a part of it. Embrace it. Become a part of it. Embrace it. When you claim your Africanness, you're going to get your mind back. Black and I'm proud. Claim your Africanness. Black and I'm proud. I'm telling you. When you claim your Africanness, you're going to get your mind back. Black and I'm proud. Claim your Africanness. Black and I'm proud. I'm telling you.
Downstairs, we have a lot of things going on. We have like martial arts, Tai Chi, all types of meditation, just physical things, kickboxing at times. We have mental health counseling, group counseling. We got a lot going on here. Brother Curtis spearheads something called Brothers Helping Brothers here. He'll actually come up shortly and lead us in libation, where we work with brothers and in this capacity at this moment as a support group. It's a really powerful support group. And everything we do here, just to let you know, what I mentioned, what I didn't mention, has to do with our holistic wellness as African people. So just know that. This is a very Afrocentric spot. If you don't know, you will learn pretty soon. I actually spoke about, now Dr. Asante might not agree with me, but this is what I said last week. I said, well, when people ask me what my tradition is, I say I'm Afrocentric or African-centered. And I'm very specific about that because this is a framework, this is a theory, this is something I can really say. I'm not actually speaking about, I'm not saying I'm not the other things either, but what I'm saying is this is the framework I come from.
That's right.
You understand? The Afrocentric, intellectual, spiritual tradition.
That's right.
And I'm specifically speaking about Afrocentricity as is defined in Afrocentricity, the book,
That's right.
and as a theoretical approach,
That's
right?
That's right.
Because I'm one of those people to believe that we can't leave out the intellectual part for the spiritual part. In fact, I don't think there's a separation when you look at it from a true African standpoint.
That's right.
So I'm not like only qualitative and without the quantitative. I'm saying we got to do quantitative and qualitative. You understand? So as I was talking to Dr. Asante earlier, I'm in the process of writing a book using the African-centered approach. So nonetheless, what I want to do is ask Brother Curtis if he can come up and lead us in libation. Give him a round of applause.
Sure.
Because when we talk about African libation, what we're really talking about is opening the way. We're talking about asking for a blessing, right? We're talking about that continuity that connects Africans here and throughout the diaspora, wherever you find our people. And we have these cultural retentions, and one of them is libation. And we do libation to really quicken the spirit, the energy, and the power of our ancestors, knowing that whenever we have these community discussions, we ask the benevolent. We don't want all of our ancestors to come, right? Because we got some Pookies and Ray Rays in our family. So when we pour libation, we talking about the most benevolent of our ancestors to bring their energy, their courage, and their power to help facilitate this most intimate conversation.
That's them too.
Those two. I'm going to actually ask y'all to stand because we should not sit when we're giving reference and giving honor to our ancestors. And we're always humbled when we come before our ancestors. And in the most humble way, I'm going to ask that the creator of all, the spirit, the force and power that created the heavens and earth, come and bless this sacred, intimate space. And we say Ashe. And to our ancestors who died throughout the Middle Passage, Those whose names we know and those who will go nameless, we remember them. And we invite them to come and sup with us just for a little. And we say, Asante. And to those scholars and people that are here carrying on the tradition, we see you. We embrace you. We ask that your spirit continue to resonate with us and you continue to do what you do. May your spirit resonate and sup with us. And to the children and also the yet unborn, because of your sacrifice here today and your sacrifice every day. For those of us that continue to remember our ancestors, we pray that our children and their children and the lineage would always remember our way. And we ask that their spirits come and resonate with us. Ashe. 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 Oh. Thank you. I'm going to hand it back over to Dr.
All right, family, give our ancestors and Brother Curtis a round of applause. All right. My dear brother just walked in. And as Africans, we can move and maneuver with the wind. I asked him if he would be willing to open up for us. My dear brother Saint Kofa, if y'all can give him a round of applause as I bring him forward. He'll open up for us and read the bios of both Dr. Nadab and Brother Dr. Molefi Kete Asante.
My name is Brother St. Copus, Brother Dennis, Dr. Dahl. Minister Sar is what I affectionately refer to him as. We go many years back. I'm honored to be before us in the room today. For many reasons, this institution here, Teaneck Holistic Wellness Center, and it in its embryo stage has poured a lot into me. And so a lot of the things that I do, I have to definitely acknowledge and pay homage to what this institution has done for my life and how it's impacted what I've been able to do for the community and my family. And then I also will be remiss if before I get into the bio, just personally express a vocal note of gratitude for Dr. Molefi Kete Asante. I was able to, in Security Mall, as a college student, hanging out, come across his book entitled Afrocentricity at a kiosk stand. And that book, Afrocentricity, would be really one of the first monumental works in my life, and it led on to other works. And as Brother Dennis has said, when it comes to reading and studying, that has been a key tool and a key element of what we've delved into. And so our relationship goes back in terms of events and different things like that. So I'm honored to be here before us today. But to get into the bio and to express the long-time contribution that both of these scholar activists have dedicated themselves to our community, I'm going to first start with Mother Dr. Nadab. And she is a proud queen mother, a grandmother, and a great-grandmother. She has lived in Ghana, Nigeria, Canada, the US, and the UK. And she graduated with a master's science degree from the Institute of Education, University of London, with a focus on racism and the underdevelopment of the black child. She graduated with a PhD from the State University of the New York Buffalo, with a focus on African culture, women, and education, and has written several articles, chapters, encyclopedia-based entries, and she has authored 3 books entitled African Mothers, Bearers of Culture, Makers of Social Change, and the Afrocentric School, a blueprint. And she has co-authored Being a Human Being, Transforming the Race Discourse, alongside with her intellectual scholarly partner, Dr. Molefi Kete Asante. Her accomplishments include her activism in developing African-centered and Afrocentric schools. Dr. Nada was an assistant professor of Africology at Temple University with a focus on African womanism as Afrocentric theory. Give a black hand for Queen Mother Dr. Nada. That's right. Last, most certainly not least, before us we have Dr. Molefi Kete Asante. I know this gentleman has authored so many books, I can't even keep count. But nevertheless, he is a professor extraordinaire at, or he has been the professor of University of South Africa, and professor in the Department of Africology at Temple University, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. He was named one of the 100 leading thinkers in America by the Utney. Thank you. Reader. See, we work together, man. That's how we get down. Ashe? Ashe. Dr. Asante is a Library of Congress history maker who the New York Times described as a scholar known for his pioneering work in the area of Afrocentricity. He authored more than 100 books, all right? Always writing, thinking, and working. Testament to that. That's right. And he's continuing to stand strong unapologetically, to put pen to paper, to use his literary voice to liberate his people, our people. And he's also written and published more than 500 articles and has been recognized as one of the 10 most widely cited African scholars. Dr. Asante was a president of the UCLA chapter of Civil Rights Organization, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee in the 60s. He received his PhD from the University of California, Los Angeles, also known as UCLA, at the age of 26, and was appointed full professor at the age of 30 at the State University of New York at Buffalo. At Temple University, he established and created a pioneering program, with the PhD program being the first in African American Studies in 1988. Since its inception, Dr. Asante has directed more than 140 PhD dissertations. So not only has he set the mark and has accomplished things himself, but he's also served as a consultant, paving the way for others to follow suit. He's a founding editor of the Journal of Black Studies and the founding director of UCLA's Center for Afro-American Studies. He is the founder of the theory, Afrocentricity, which I'm sure will be expanded upon more today, the Chief Anti-Joke Conference, and the think tank, the Molefi Kete Asante Institute for Afrocentric Studies in Philadelphia, and he is an influential leader in education and a consultant for school districts seeking to build Afrocentric curricula. Last, most certainly not least, what I will say about both of these two individuals, and I don't have to say, even though I know Dr. Asante more so than Dr. Dove here, I can say because she rolls with him and they roll with each other, I know the person she is by being with this beloved brother. On the car ride here, I was listening to a show that Dr. Daw and myself had put on years ago in another space, and we were interviewing Dr. Asante, and we were asking him, how do we know that this theory that you refer to as Afrocentricity works? How do you know that it really does something? How is it evident? And one of the things, remember that, Dr. Asante? Remember that conversation? Yes. And one of the things that he said, all right, I'm sure we'll probably build on it today. One of the things that he said is character. Because with all of the stuff that I read, and there's probably a lot more than this, he said character, being a good person, a good African, a good human being. So with that being said, I'm honored and delighted and proud to stand. I can go on and on and on. I'm going to sit on down and I'm going to take in what it is that they have to say. But nevertheless, without further ado, without further delay, put our black Afrocentric hands together for our scholars of the time for today, Dr. Nada and Dr. Molefi Kete Asante. Ashe, 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 Ashe. All right, family.
Wow, that's right. You know what? Brother, I'm going to take you with us.
You see what I'm
I tell you, boy. I tell you.
Thank you so much, Brother Osar. Brother Osar and Brother Sankofa, yeah, we go back a long ways.
Yes, sir.
I just want to say I am very grateful to be here at Tinat, because it is a wonderful feeling to be in a room where you know that the energy and the spirit is the same as the energy and spirit you have. This is amazing. You can be at a place where there are 10,000 people, but if the spirit is not right, it doesn't matter. What matters is the strength and the victory that I see in you. And I just want to thank you for inviting me and Dr. Dove to come and to present on our book, Being Human Being, Transforming the Race Discourse. I just want to say a couple of more things, and then I'll get into my presentation a little bit, and then Dr. Dove will come in. One of the things that happens, and I appreciate Brother Sankofa for talking about all the things that I've written, and I write every day. I try to write every day. That is just, and it's been a part of my family from Georgia. My grandfather was a writer, and my father was a writer, and I write, and my son writes, and my daughter writes. So we just say we write, because for me, writing is a way to help me order my thinking, and also to speak to the issues that I think are significant. But even though you write, sometimes as you write, you would like to test your ideas with other people. And I have written these 104 books. But in writing 104 books, I have only written 3 books that I know of with any other person. And I may have missed some, but I know that I've edited books with more than 20 people, 20 different people. I have edited books with them. And so you will see my name with a number of other writers and scholars, but those books were edited. When you edit a book, that means that you collect articles or essays from other people and you make a book. You put that book together. Or you have an encyclopedia and you ask people to write different items for the encyclopedia. But I have only written, I think, with other scholars, 3 books. One with a woman named Mary Casada, one with a guy named Jerry Fry, and one with Na Dove. Now, let me just say about writing with other people, because while I have written most of my books by myself, writing with other people is a very special talent, because what it means is that you have to be on the same wavelength. If you're not, you can't write the same thing. So if you look at all the books I've written and you say, I wonder why you didn't write a book with that person, you have to say they were not on the same wavelength. You just have to understand that. But one of the things writing this particular book, Being Human Being, Transforming the Race Discourse, has done for me is to show me the significance and the importance for us as African people to define our own reality. Now, let me just tell you that Dr. Dove taught at Temple back in the 90s. And she should have been, by now, a full professor. But she went off and worked in schools, went off and worked in Africa, and she came back to Temple. But her vision and her intellectual understanding was defined by her relationship with Sheikh Anta Diop. Now, Sheikh Anta Diop is the greatest African intellectual of the 20th century. Nobody greater than Sheikh Anta intellectual. Now, I say that. I love Du Bois. I write about Du Bois. But Du Bois did not do for us as African people what Sheikh Anta Diop did for us. If you don't have the African origin of civilization, you need to go get it. You need to read that book, because what he did was to challenge the entire European structure of knowledge itself. Basically, turn the world upside down. That's what he did. Du Bois, his strength was taking the facts that had been given to us and showing a new interpretation on those facts. That's what Du Bois did, and he was great at it. Nobody greater than Du Bois at that. But what Sheikh Anta did was to question how you even came up with those facts in the first place. And that was the important thing. And so when I met Dr. Dove, and she was dealing with the two cradle theory, and she'll talk more about that Sheikh Anta Diop had talked about culture, it coincided with my thinking about Afrocentricity. And let me be clear, Brother Osa, let me be very clear that Afrocentricity as an intellectual idea may have started with me, but the practice of being Afrocentric happened before me. There were people who were Afrocentric. They didn't call it Afrocentricity, but they were Afrocentric before me. I just named it. But I didn't name Afrocentric. I named Afrocentricity. Remember that, because people will have an argument with you. Dr. Asante didn't come up with Afrocentric. That's right, I didn't. Who came up with that was either Du Bois or Kwame Nkrumah in 1962 and 64. So you have that information that you can have in 1961 and 62, I'm sorry. So you can have that information, and that came out of the Encyclopedia Africana. This is the encyclopedia that Du Bois was doing when he died. He was doing this encyclopedia for Kwame Nkrumah. Kwame Nkrumah invited him to Ghana, said, I want you to do an encyclopedia, and I want it to be Afrocentric. But the word Afrocentricity, the noun Afrocentricity, is what I wrote my book about, and that had never been used as far as I know of until I wrote that book. Now, what is Afrocentricity? This is part of what we're going to talk about when we get into talking about being human being. Afrocentricity is a view of the world, a perspective, a meta theory. Meta means beyond, it's more than a theory. It is, some people call it a paradigm, and I've mentioned about it being a paradigm. And I've influenced other people to call it a paradigm. It's a major shift in the way people think. That's what Afrocentricity is, number one. It's a major way we think. And let me just tell you how it happened to me. And in fact, someone is going to call me, a brother is writing about this now, Dr. Day in California, and he's called me a couple of days ago. He says, I need to have a conversation with you about what happened. How did Afrocentricity come to you? What is that? What's the process? And I told him the process was living in Buffalo, New York, in the midst of snowstorms, in the midst of winters that were long, 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 and sitting by the fireplace trying to figure out what is wrong with the way African people see the world. That is it's a reflection. I would see the sparks in the fireplace, and I would wonder what's going on here with Africa, with African people. And what struck me was that we were not at the center of our own situations, that we were on the margins of Europe, that every indication for us was, what did the Europeans think? What did they say? How did they view the world? Back in those days, we were even scared to say that we were good at something. Who's the best basketball player? Jerry West. You know, we were scared because we were always on the margins. We couldn't be the center. And I saw that over and over again in black people. I saw black people with a sense of, we call it today self-hatred. I saw the way we demean each other, and the way men demean women, and the way women demean men. And I said, what's going on here? And it was fundamentally because we were marginal. And we saw ourselves in the periphery of Europe, and we did not take control of ourselves. And I've always said, we're not a beggar people. We don't come from that tradition. But we turn ourselves into beggars. We turn ourselves into beggars because we believe that the ideas we had were not significant enough. And so we borrowed ideas from Europe. Europe's ideas were always significant, more important. That's why brothers run around and say, I'm a Marxist. What are they talking about? Because they never thought about what's the African idea? What's the way we think? How do we approach economics? What is the way that we see the world? And we went everywhere else. It's a fundamental problem. So Afrocentricity says that what we have to do is to recenter ourselves, see ourselves in the history of all situations, in the middle of all phenomena. That phenomena means everything that happens. We're right at the center of it. We're not on the margins. We're not on the periphery. We are the people who are agents, actors. We're not spectators to other people. What you have to ask in any situation is, what is the African interest in that situation? What did the Africans do? Don't just say that everybody else is doing something. What did we do? What's our role? And what happened to us? When someone says that, Lewis and Clark traveled from the East and surveyed America, they took with them a man by the name of York. So my question is, what was York doing? What did York say? And sometimes York didn't write because all the time Europeans were writing. So then what did they say about York? And you know what they said about York? They wouldn't have survived if it hadn't been for York. He was a negotiator with the native people. He was the one who killed the bear that threatened to kill them. So where is York in the history of America? You see? So you got Lewis and Clark, but wait a minute. Don't just do that. And this is extremely important. Every situation in the United States of America, almost every situation, you got to ask the question, what was the African interest? Where were African people? What were we doing when Thomas Jefferson and all those people were meeting in Philadelphia and talking about the Constitution, or when they were talking, even before that, the Declaration of Independence? Well, what were black people saying? Black people were saying something. We were the ones who were cooking. We were the ones who were driving the buggies that drove them around the city. We were the ones who were making up the beds. So what were we thinking? That's the question that I want to ask. And as an Afrocentric, those are the questions we ask. And we have to get at those questions sometimes by ways that we that are not normal. We need to ask, what do white people write? And we have to ask that question about African people during the enslavement period. There were so many of us who were enslaved. So what were we doing when we were enslaved? And who were we? What kind of character did we have? And we only know that. We only know that by what white people said about us, because we didn't necessarily write when we escaped. They say, 17-year-old wench who has great ability to articulate, may speak both Dutch and English, with bruises on her left wrist, escaped 2 weeks ago. So now what do we know about her? She's smart. She's intelligent. She doesn't like slavery. She ran away. And so forth. So that's how you have to read back. We have to read back into history. And so I'll just stop here right now, and maybe Dr. Dove will take up a little bit about the book, and then I'll come back a little bit, because otherwise I can talk for 5 hours. I come from an old Baptist tradition, so I don't want to do that. But I don't want to take over from Dr. Dove. Dr. Dove has a very, very brilliant thing. Thank you.
It's a great honor to be here, and thank you very much for the invitation. It's really wonderful to be in such beautiful surroundings, to be able to speak our truths. And I think it's important that one understands what is Africology, what is Afrocentric theory, because the book is grounded in the theory. And theory is very important because there's an outcome. What is the outcome of theory? What is one trying to say? What is the end product of theory? So Afrocentric theory is really about becoming human. And it is a theory that can be used by anyone, really. In the book, we try to show the African origin of civilization from a Jopian perspective. And one of the most powerful things that Jope gave us was the understanding of culture. He calls himself the authentic anthropologist. He was skilled in many areas, in many disciplines, including Egyptology. And part of the Afrocentric theory is to say, in saying, who are we? The theory goes back to ancient Africa to find out who we were before we were conquered and enslaved. And enslavement, of course, is something that's been happening to African people, dark-skinned people, for 2,000 years through the Arabic control and creation of the belief in Africans needing to be enslaved for sinful things that they have done in the past. So there's a justification, but all of it is make-believe, and the importance of culture in that sense is to show how culture influences the mind. You can see culture in the way people behave, the things they build, the social structures that they develop. And one can see, as Sheikh Hantif Job tried to show us, that there are distinctions in culture. It's not just one thing where everybody's engaged in culture, but that there are, from the two cradle theory perspective, that there are two major cultures, and they are based on the relationship between the woman and the man, who are the creators of culture and the creators of life. Their differences are related to the domination of the woman, equality, reciprocity, harmony, justice. These are the things that come from Africa, the origin of humanity. And the second cradle, that is the first cradle he talks about, and the second one, these are culturally informed, is when the woman is dominated by the man. And he puts that to environmental situations where Africa had everything, was abundant with everything, so people could be creative and go beyond just surviving. They could survive well because everything was there. So the domination of the woman, patriarchy we'll call it, is really related to an environment which is very hard, difficult for the woman, who is the potential mother, to be able to survive. And so thoughts about survival in harsh climates place the woman on a lower level because she needed protection and so on and so forth. But the ideas that came out of this culture, which is the one that we're living in now, the ideas that came out of it were really based on the injustice of hierarchicalizing the woman as a lower person biologically and so on. It doesn't mean that if the woman needs protection, it must be done in a horrible way. But it does mean that in this setting, this environmental setting, new ideas, new ways of thinking about life evolved from this relationship, because it was in fact the first injustice. This is the type of thing that's here. But out of the first injustice came the idea of hierarchy. So we live in a setting where, we're always hierarchicalizing everything from the flower to the cat. It doesn't matter what we think of, we're always thinking that one is better than the other, and there's this model. And we use that based on the inferiorizing of the woman, who is the potential mother. And we've shown in the book how this can be traced, this patriarchal, hierarchical construct can be traced in religions, the modern religions. We can look at the Brahmin religion, the precursor to the Hindu religion, which is one of the oldest religions that proclaim the inferiority of the woman and the black person. And then there's the Hebraic one, from which Christianity arises and Islam arises, where there's a justification to look at a woman as biologically inferior, and ideas that her inferiority, because she was not faithful to her husband, would cause her to have problems being a woman, having menses and periods and having children and so on. These are all, in fact, people often say, I'm cursed today. That comes out of these type of beliefs.
Religions, yes.
And also the ability to have children who survive, and the ability to survive having children. So that's all part of this religious belief system, patriarchal religious belief system. And they played very much into the modern setting of the pseudosciences that said that we were all races and genetically different. And so this really came out of the religious sphere, to believe that we are biologically and genetically different. These are the ideas. And they fed into a process of enslavement that Dr. Asante was talking about here, so that the ships that went to Africa and enslaved Africans all used religious names and so on. So it was a belief system. It is a belief system. And when you believe something, you practice it.
That's right.
But the point is, if it is a genetic system, then you can't change it except by using the way that race was constructed to change the position. And the murders and genocide that went into creating the race construct can only be copied to change the race construct. So that is countless hundreds of millions of people who had to die to produce the construct of race. And, so I will leave you there.
Thank you very much. Now, here's the thing. So for us, when we started looking at this and this whole question of race, we said, wait a minute, this illusion, this is a biological illusion. There's only one race, the human race. And where did the human race start? In Africa. Homo sapiens, there are 8 million people on the earth today. Those 8 million people, wherever they are on the earth, started in Africa. They have the same DNA as an African woman who lived about 300,000 years ago in East Africa. That's according to science. So if that's the case, then we got these differentiations. We got Asians, Europeans, we got people. So what's their background? Their background has to be African. One race, human race. Now, that's where the problem comes. Because we got one race whose origin is Africa, and before 70,000 years ago, all people in the world were black. There was nobody in the world but black people. Before 70,000 years ago. Why? Because Africans had not migrated out of Africa. Think about that. Everybody in the world was black. Then some of us migrated out of Africa. Everybody didn't leave Africa. Sometimes people give the impression, humanity was started in Africa, but migrated out of Africa. Wait a minute. There's almost 2 billion people in Africa right now. So everybody didn't leave Africa. But a lot of people started leaving around 70,000 years ago. And they went to Europe and went to Asia and went all the way to Australia. 50,000 years ago, we see the original people, the indigenous people in Australia landed there. People landed in Micronesia and all those South Pacific islands. This is African people. This is migration. And after thousands of years, you get through climate change, through climatic conditions, through isolation, through genetic mutations, all kinds of things, you get people of different phenotypes. Phenotypes means physical traits. That's how you get distinction. But they're all human beings. What has happened is that many of these people have forgotten their origin. So this is why we say transforming the race discourse. We say the only way you can transform the race discourse is not to engage in the race discourse. Because if you engage in the race discourse, what you ultimately end up with is that you just move one hierarchy to another hierarchy. If the Europeans are not dominating, then the Asians are dominating. If the Asians are not dominating, then the Africans are dominating. No. We said, no, there's one human race. But how do you be human being? To be human being is to go back to what Dr. Dove was saying. The whole concept that Sankofa mentioned about character. That's fundamental. You got to have these basic African traits and character. Because if you don't have good character, and this is what the Yoruba people say, part of my DNA when I did my African ancestry, part of it was Yoruba. The Yoruba say that you got to have Iwa Rere. Iwa Rere means good character. That's all God asks. God doesn't ask for you to have money, status. God doesn't ask for you to travel around the world. God asks of you, Ifa asks of you one thing and one thing only. Iwa Rere, good character. Not even love. That's not even in the Yoruba dictionary. They don't you know how the Christians say love is the highest value. That's not what the Yoruba say. They say good character is the highest value. That's what Africans say, good character. If you show me good character, all the other stuff will happen. Yes. But and that's what I told my children, show me good character. That's what I want. And good character is at the base of this. So being a human being, when it applies to African people in Baltimore or Philadelphia or in Mobile or in Colombia or Brazil or in South Africa, those questions, we deal with that fundamentally in here. I just want to read a few passages and then there may be questions. I don't know, Brother also how you set it up, but if there are questions, there could certainly be questions. We'll be really happy to take those. But one of the things that we talk about the house of race. If you were in the house of race, what do you get? You get patriarchy, you get white supremacy, you get the hierarchy of races. Some are better than others, some are inferior, some are superior. You get a hierarchy of gender. You get highlighting the otherness of other people, alterity. You get weaponizing physical traits. If you got a sharp nose, that's better than having a flat nose. You get assertion of Anglo-Germanic or Aryan superiority. You get the belief that race is approved by nature and by gods. You get a toxic relationship with other people. You get self-centered greed. You get exploitation of non-white people. You get deceitful interactions. But if you're in the house of humanity, you get, first of all, one humanity, Homo sapiens. You get commonalities outweigh differences, the acceptance of difference, respect for life, dignity in being human, humility facing difference, cooperation over competitiveness. That's what you get if you're in the house of humanity. And then one more thing I want to read, because I think this is important. So people say, well, how do you bring this into being? What do we do? It's not enough that we have examined the foundation of race, illusion, this illusion of race, because there's no biological reason to talk about race. This is like, we're going to get into Kamala too, probably, but we'll talk about it later. But it just crossed my mind as I was thinking about this. But here's what I think you have to do. We got to stop killing black people because of race. You know, this policeman just killed his sister. Just ran into her house, and she must have had mental issues. And she was at the stove with some hot water. He shot her in the face. Mm-hmm. That's just this past week. This is like, wait a minute. You got to stop killing black people just because of race. You got to stop doing that. You got to stop killing any people because of race, religion, or gender. You got to stop divesting black people of economic power. You got to stop doing that. You have to stop you got to stop assuming based on color or caste that black people are criminal. You know, this is I'm telling you, Being Human Being is a powerful book, because we are saying, wait a minute, just because I walk down the street and I'm black, oh no. Or just because a person walked down the street and you think there's a problem there, no. And I think this has to do with all kinds of things. Stop protecting police, security forces, and politicians who trade on racial rhetoric. Stop promoting white people who preach the spurious racial superiority doctrine. Stop advancing organizations that discriminate on the basis of race. Embrace humanity. Embrace commonality of opportunity and possibility. Embrace all children as teachable. Embrace the beauty of diversity. Embrace the African origin of humanity. Embrace all colors and complexions and humans as equal. Embrace the common human quest to protect the Earth's environment. Embrace a common quest for cultural pluralism. Embrace cultural differences as the human rainbow. And embrace all genders. This is our human possibility. This is what we have to do. This is how we express humanity. That, you know, if you make, and I'll just say this about religion, because, I can say this at the temple, right? I'm going to say this. It's okay if I say this. I'm going to have to say this. See, the biggest problem in the African world, if you ask me, is religion. It's the biggest problem. But it's the biggest problem in the world generally. I travel all over the continent of Africa. I see what's happening in Africa. It's just as bad as here. You got a preacher in Zimbabwe who has his own helicopter, flies between Johannesburg and Harare. who has a church of 25,000 people in Harare and one like that in South Africa. And he is basically preaching this whole idea to just give me all your money. And people doing it. You got people in Africa right now, in all of North Africa, including the other part of where my ancestry comes from, Sudan, and including Uganda and Kenya and all the Sahel states that have become so Islamized that they are destroying their own original culture. They say all these masks, destroy them. That's a violation of Islam. Destroy everything. So the Muslims, the Arab Muslims, have them destroying their culture. The European missionaries, Christian missionaries, stole it. They took, I was a student at UCLA and they showed me 2,000 pieces of Yoruba art in the basement of Haynes Hall on UCLA's campus. I said, how did they get this? They said the missionaries brought them back from Africa when they went to Africa to give the people Christianity. They say, okay, you got Christianity, you give us those statues, you give us those masks, we'll take them back and we'll sell them to the universities. That, I'm telling you, is the biggest problem. And what does religion do? It says that my God is better than your God. And my God will kill your God. And not only that, my God tells me that if you're a pagan or a heathen, or if you're you're what?
Non-believer.
A non-believer, then you shouldn't even be in the conversation. Can you believe? I mean, this is, so people don't, can there be peace between the Israelis and the Palestinians? What's the source of this? That somebody believes that they're better than other people. Who can say that? That's not an African concept. That doesn't come anywhere out of the epistemology of ancient Africa. It doesn't come out of the cradle that Dr. Dove was talking about, that Joke talked about. No, that's not an African thing. Who talks about this hierarchy? Some people are higher than others because of color and physical types. That's stupid stuff. But it's a stupid stuff that is based fundamentally on the religions that people attach themselves to. So I have very little to say about that.
Can I have a little word?
Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay, just to add to what Dr. Asante is saying, importantly, culture needs to be defined from an Afrocentric perspective, because culture from a European perspective is racialized. So there's the superior culture, the white culture, and the inferior black culture. And Sheikh Anta Diop, in writing the book The African Origin, dismisses the lunacy of this idea. But, our position is not that race doesn't exist. Racism does exist, the construct does exist in the minds of people who make it real. So we're not trying to say it doesn't exist. What we're trying to say is that we have to begin a new way of looking at it, because it is the mind that creates the culture and the culture that creates the mind. In the Eurocentric idea of culture, the mind doesn't really play a role. But in the African idea of culture, the mind is absolutely key, because the mind is attached to the heart and the soul of humanity. So that is where the work begins. The battle is actually for the mind. And, so it's a cultural construct. The creation of race is a cultural construct. It comes out of the northern cradle and the belief in hierarchy. So we wanted to show that clearly in the book, and to show how culture works to define who we think we are. So the reason for us thinking that we're inferior and so on. I'm a privileged person. I'm African, but I'm privileged based on the color of my skin. And I use my privilege in the best way that I can because I'm an African. But you know, what is happening is that the mind is the place that is attacked in the Pan-European Academy, that where Africology as a discipline arises. It is the only discipline that is not racist. Every other discipline is racist because it believes in the inferiority of Africa and African people. So there's a thing called theory of evolution, which is that we came from monkeys and then we left Africa, and all the people that stayed in Africa were ignorant, and the people that left Africa became civilized, the whiter they became. So that is really fundamental to all these disciplines. Not only that, but they received funds from the blood of African people being enslaved and colonized. So, you know, there are these aspects of the Pan-European Academy that we're all being taught that are culturally affirmed. So it's very difficult for African people, dark-skinned African people, to appreciate and love what is being said about them, us, inside the academy, because the truth is that Africa is the start. All our ancestors are African, all our ancestors are black, but we've been taught to believe the opposite, to believe that our ancestors were uncivilized. But actually, all the first civilizations of humanity came out of Africa. And one has to look chronologically at that reality, you know, but it's hard because the discipline itself in the department is being destroyed every day by racists who are pretending that whatever they're pretending, I can't go there. But, you know, Dr. Asante by now should have received so many, not only professors to work into a department that's developing, they're all being reduced, but the accolades of a person who has achieved so much. And he's nothing in the university.
Don't say that now.
Well,
Say
what you deserve. What you deserve.
Dr. Ayo, how you doing?
What you
Dr.
deserve. I'm saying, I don't know that. But I am incensed, as everybody should be, at the debasement of your character.
Okay. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I appreciate you, Dr. No,
Thank you.
I want to say on July 24th, there was this really wanted to just also acknowledge Ayo, Dr. Sakai, who's just come in. She's actually a publisher of our book, Being Human Being, and also of Dr. Dove's other book, The Afrocentric School. This is also published by Universal Right, these two books. So if you get a chance, please, before you leave, if you don't have a copy, purchase a copy from Alsar over there.
Ayo is brave, a brave woman who published these books because they absolutely do not want these words out there.
Right. So she is. Thank you so much. I just want to say one other comment, and then we can open it up for a question. July 24th, there was a publication in Egypt Independent by a gentleman by the name of Washim El-Sisi, attacking Afrocentricity. This is published in Egypt and is circulated around the world. And basically he criticizes Afrocentrists for saying that the ancient Egyptians were black. So it has set up a real argument and debate between us. And I've responded to it on my Facebook page. And I've also responded to it by writing an article in response to El-Sisi. Now, El-Sisi uses a 2017 study that was done by the Max Planck Institute out of Germany, which looked at a lot of mummies from a particular space in Egypt and said that these mummies didn't seem to have anything to do with Africa, that they didn't relate to Africa. So this study, I looked at the study and I looked at the response to the study. One of the things that has happened, and this is very important for you to understand, that the people who are controlling Egypt at this time are mainly Arab people, and they have a negative attitude toward black people. And this is why Sheikh Anta Diop used the word black Africans, because he said the ancient Egyptians were black Africans. He wanted to stamp that, because otherwise, if you say African, they don't know. They say, well, we're Arabs, but we're Africans. No, they have a notion of an Arab culture that is hierarchical in the sense that they see Africans as inferior. This is very, very critical for us as Africans to understand. If we don't understand this, we understand nothing about the Arab culture in Africa. And Arabs did not come to Africa in mass until 639 AD. That is this era. You don't have Arabs building the pyramids. They didn't build the temples of ancient Egypt. They didn't build the tombs where we have all the art. They didn't write the papyrus, the papyri that we have in ancient Egypt. It is not written in Arabic. So we have a big problem that people who have occupied Egypt now are claiming that the African Americans, particularly, who come to Egypt and say, hey, we're coming home to our classical civilization, they're saying that the African Americans are wrong. But it's not true. African Americans are right. They're wrong. In fact, this study that this man cited has been discredited by all other scholars who looked at it. And they have said that it's almost like if you come to Baltimore and you go to a cemetery that's a Protestant cemetery, and you dig up the graves and you study the DNA of those people, you probably won't find the Native Americans. But this land was occupied by the Native Americans long before those people. And in Egypt, if you go to an area where the Greeks settled in a particular area and you dig up the mummies of those areas, you will find Greek people. If you go and find where the Hyksos were buried, you will find mummies like that. So what the people are saying is, look, this study, number one, Egypt is a big country. This is a small area, and this is an area where foreigners settled. They settled there. So that's why you got that. If you look all over Kemet, you will discover that it is, of course, a place where black Africans created the first nation in the world. Kemet, first nation in the world, was created by Menes. So this is the very beginning. And one other thing, and then I'll be finished with this, but it's important about all this race stuff and culture and so on. In Sudan, right now, we have a big problem in Sudan, a very big problem. And I'm engaged in the discussion and the discourses around Sudan. You got two Arab factions fighting each other. And these Arab factions who are fighting each other, if you look at the people who are on both sides, they look like us in here. So you say, wait a minute, why are these two black groups fighting each other? But they're not black in their minds. That's why Dr. Dove talked about the mind. The mind is important. Culture is important. So these two groups are fighting each other. The RSF, the Rapid Support Forces, are fighting the army. Both of them are controlled by Arab factions who are trying to get the upper hand. One group supported by the Emirates and the other group supported by Saudi Arabia. And they're fighting, struggling. But the masses of people, 85% of the people of Sudan are black Africans who don't see themselves as Arabized. The Arabized black people who have taken on an Arab identity are fighting each other to control the masses of black Africans in Sudan right to this day. So we need to understand that. If we don't understand that, we will be confused about everything that's going on. And let me just show you, and this is really, I'm going to end right here, because Dr. Dove just raised this point that made me think about it in terms of just chronology. See, there are African people. When you talk to African people from Sudan, they always, if they're Arabized, they want to say they trace their ancestry to Muhammad. This is a mistake for any African. Muhammad is recent. You don't trace if anything, you trace your ancestry back to Amenorimus, to Amanashaketi, to Taharka, to Tanutaman, to Shabataka, to Shabaka, to Pianki, to Imhotep. Why are you going to trace your ancestry to 600 AD instead of the thousands of years of history of Sudan? Well, what sense does that make? It makes no sense, except it's a hierarchy of Arab culture defining who Africans are, because we have not asserted an Afrocentric identity. That's the fundamental problem. So I'm going to stop here, Brother Asante. Doctor, you want to say it?
It's in here.
It's all in the, Dr. Dove said, Dr. Dove says it's all in the book. It's all in the book. And I thank you so much. And so if you have any questions, please, yes, sister.
We're so glad that you are both here.
Thank you.
And I'd like for you to discuss Isabel Wilkerson's work and if it in fact ties in, because she never talks about culture or race, she talks about class. So what is she, and caste, what is she missing?
Okay. You want to take it? Want me to take it?
Well, she is missing the history of the people that she's talking about. Caste is very real and we're practicing it here, but it's actually race. So when you go back to the Brahmins, you find that each caste is associated with a particular god of a particular color. So the lowest, the Sudras, are at the feet. They're the black ones at the feet. And but what she isn't doing is going beyond that to contextualize the history that led to that, because those people, the Sudra, are the original people. And they were conquered by the Indo-Aryans, who created those dynamics and placed themselves at the top as Brahmins. So she's missing that part of it, you know. So
Absolutely.
it still tells you that we're in a structure that is hierarchicalizing humanity, and it's beautiful in that way. But it needs to go further to see the African origin of the Harappan civilization that built architecture in the same as their ancestors in Kemet. It's the same. You know, when you see what they've achieved, they were conquered by the Indo-Aryans. They were also literate, they were also matriarchal and so on. And the Indo-Aryans were patriarchal. They got rid of the women. They, you know, and they learnt how to write through the original black people who are at the bottom. But the people below the black people at the bottom are those within these castes that came together and produced children. So it's forbidden. They tried to forbid it here and in South Africa, you know.
That's right.
And do that and say that race makes you separates your genetics, and it's an abomination to mix them. And they've done that there. So the untouchable people whose shadows cast, are so below that the higher ups don't want to be anywhere near these people, and they're not actually considered to be people, but they're all different colors. They're not just the dark skin Sudra above them. The Sudra are not allowed to do writings and things like that, but the untouchables are not even people. So, and it's still like that. It's in the book.
It's in the book. We have that in the book. We have that in the book, and that's how we differ from Isabel. Isabel's work is important because she brought to sort of a popular audience a whole question of the caste thing, but she doesn't have the historical background about Africa that's significantly there. But the other thing I want to say just about the whole caste system, because I was talking about religion earlier, that's what religions do. See, when you conquer, if you show me your conqueror, I will show you your religion. Because what the conquerors do is basically give you their religion. That's what they do. So they conquered the original indigenous black people of India and then gave them a religion, Hindu, which gave them a hierarchy and told them that in order for you to improve your life, when you die, you got to you can't have a conflict with all these other castes. You got to stay in your particular caste, and then when you come back around another time, maybe it would be different for you. And so, if you're religious and you believe in that, you are boxed in. There's no way to get out of it, and that's why some people became Christians who were in India, and some people became Muslims because they say, I want to get out of this system, but they got out of one system into another system. It's all the same. These systems create this desire for people to try to figure out, how do I live in this society? But that's the key point to that Hindu religion, which has created this serious problem. So that somebody like Manu is the one who wrote what they call the laws of Manu. This is the person whose name whose name is found in the English language in the word manuscript. His name is Manu. Manu gave rules and regulations and advice to how women should be treated, how children should be treated, how different castes should be treated. And people follow that. And that stuff is strange to me. Sorry. Okay,
I know which page it's on here.
And it's all in the book.
I love it. So one of the things that I agree with Africa being the first. And I had a thought that when the migration happened and folk lost their melanin, did they lose their mind? But I was reading here, even in the introduction, you talk about ending the language of race itself to solve the problem of racism. What are your thoughts about how we see race from a neuroscience perspective, and how we, our midbrains are experiencing all that we've gone through, and why we stay as African people under the thumbs of our oppressors, perpetuating the same things? Because if our brain, if you're talking about the mind and culture, then that middle part of the brain is regulating 90% of our body. And when we see these things happening, we fall back into that system. Right.
Well, this is why. Can I This is why culture is so important to recognize, and why people do not use culture in any analysis of societies. They usually, the highest level of thinking is usually ideology. They use ideology. But the thing about culture is that how it has been imposed upon our minds is actually structured so that when people are conquered, they're prevented from carrying out any cultural rituals or beliefs, their music, the language, everything pertaining to something that will give them an idea of their cultural identity. But the most significant thing is preventing ancestral respect. So if you look at these religions, you will see that it's an abomination to raise ancestors.
Yes.
But the thing is that the ancestors tell us who we are. And when it's continued, that's how we know who we are. So if you make it a sin to remember your ancestors,
That's right.
you can't remember yourself. You see,
That's
so
beautiful.
that's why you can have
beautiful.
people who are African who are
Yes.
behaving like Europeans
Yes.
or Arabs,
Yes.
depending on who the conqueror is.
Yes.
You know, and believing all that because everything has been forbidden
Yes.
as a crime.
Yes.
Thank you
Oh,
both
it's
for
powerful.
a wonderful
Thank
presentation.
you. Thank you.
Thank you.
So my question to both of you is, when it comes to the topic of religion, which has been a topic that you shed a lot of light on today, are there any exceptions, or does any of our brothers and sisters get a pass?
Yes,
Is it realistic that perhaps all of our people, all of our kinfolk, all of our African brothers and sisters will fall under that framework? And so, before you address it, to go a little deeper as to where this is coming from, I know you said, Dr. Asante, that you hail from a Baptist tradition.
Yes.
I do too. My father's a Baptist minister on my father's side. I have a lot of preachers, ministers, all those types of things.
Yes.
I know historically, as we were given the Bible, there were some instances where perhaps we were kept from reading it because we were off the chain on that plantation, causing wreaking havoc and doing a whole lot of things in a very revolutionary way. I also think about perhaps some people may not ever get to the wonderful things that was said, but some religion might be that vehicle to maybe keep some people in check from doing drugs or from, being violent in certain ways or taking out their anger on certain people or things like that. Then furthermore, I think about also the value potentially in drawing strength from something outside yourself. And then last point is, I think about what has been interesting to me going into history, looking at our tradition of organizing, the AME Church, Black abolitionism, Richard Allen, Philadelphia, the colored conventions. Now, these people may not ever say that they was African or even subscribe to an African-centered, Afrocentric paradigm. But I think what they were doing is, in my opinion, very much lock in step with what we're talking about. So with the religion piece, and I will agree, it definitely can be detrimental to many of our people. Let me be clear.
Sure.
But are there any instances where perhaps we can maybe look past that and still not use it as a vehicle to further divide? And if that was a lot, my apologies.
No, that's correct.
Right. I said it's absolutely right, because what you have to know is that all these religions are based on the ancient. You've got to know that all these religions are based on the ancient religions that preceded them, that had a cultural orientation that respected the ancestors, the women, the children, and so on and so forth. So inside these religions are the jewels, and some people see the jewels of their ancient ancestors. So we're only giving the big picture of what it's done, but that doesn't mean that because of that we can't ever escape from that, or we can't appreciate some of the things that they bring. I'm not, we are definitely not coming from the position that if you're, an Arab, if you're Islamic, Sheikh Job was Islamic.
Right.
You came from the Christian tradition.
Yeah.
It's not like that's not what we're
but it's
saying.
important to say I came from it.
Yeah.
but I appreciate and I appreciate the comment, and I agree with you very much.
Thank you.
Because there are values, you see. And I think you pointed out some of the values, the organizational values. I mean, without the Martin Luther King Jr. and the church tradition, we wouldn't have had that organization. You see, of civil rights movement. I mean, and then, as you say, Richard Allen and all these people, these are historical figures. We have to honor them.
Yeah.
We have to praise them. But we can also think what would have happened had they had an African epistemology. That's what we have to think. See, all religions are the deifications of your nationalism. It's the making sacred of your own history. That's why do people say Mecca is important? Why is Mecca more important than Ile-Ife in Nigeria? Or more important than the sacred grounds of Tuskegee? You see? Because people make their traditions sacred. And that becomes, and their rituals, they make their rituals survive. And why is it that in Sudan, they prevent African people from speaking African languages? You gotta speak Arabic. Because for them, God only understands Arabic. And all other languages are crazy to them, you see? This is what religion do. So my concern about us and religion is that we don't sometimes understand that that's part of our neuroscientific problems. And that we've got to be able to master that and to deal with that. And then we say, okay, this is useful for me. It could keep me from drugs. It could keep me from this or that or the other. Then that's fine. I don't have any problem with that. But I think sometimes the drug becomes a religion. That's just my thought. So,
thank you both for coming. It's a pleasure.
thank you. Thank you.
You kind of touched on what I was actually about to talk about. Sometimes I think, well, just my thinking, like we as Black people, as Africans, we kind of concentrate on what has been dominated psychologically by Europeans. Like, so we concentrate a lot on Egypt. We concentrate a lot on the west coast of Africa. We concentrate a lot on like Caribbean. And my thing is like, Africa's such a vast place. Like South America gets left out of the thinking, the indigenous people there and things like that. I was just wanted to know, like, in your studies or in your travels, have you witnessed even yourself or other scholars who have delved deeper into those parts of Africa, those parts of other countries that bring out those cultures and things like that actually would it actually like defends yourself against those Eurocentric principles because they don't dominate in those areas. I mean, they're there, but they don't dominate the ideology in those areas. So,
well, go ahead, please.
I just want to say that this is where culture comes in, because the indigenous people of the world who are still remaining practice African ways of being and are matriarchal, essentially. We have to keep on, judging that and researching that. But from the findings, that's why they're conquered, but they're given they're racialized and everything. Like the red people of here who were, You know, it's just shameful. They're not even in our history. So even when we as black people are talking about compensation, I mean, the original people, where are they? They're not in our books. They're not in our books, but they're in Africology. They have to be because they're the original people. But in looking at them across the Americas and so on, there are African matriarchal beliefs still in existence. That's in some ways what makes them weak, but that they stay away from the other stuff, you know, which maintains that. But in relation to what you're saying, I think that's why we have to look at culture. Otherwise, we're looking at these indigenous people as black people, as red people, as yellow people, but they all have this cultural orientation. And that's why we're using culture so we can see that connection, the similarities amongst people and so on. And we can always judge whether it's civilization or not, because if the mother is not the center of any social organization, it's not civilization.
That's what we have to say, right? Truly, that's one of the defining characteristics. And we are interested in South America, and in fact, Dr. Dove works in Australia as well with indigenous people, and I just came from Colombia, and so but to be honest with you, many of the problems are similar to our problems here. I mean, so because we all have, in a sense, been in a world that has been dominated by Westernity. And Westernity is really, it is conquered one of the most fascinating things that I saw, for example, last month when I was in Colombia, was you go to Palenque, which is a very important place to go to in Colombia, because that's where the first, people always talk about Haiti or they talk about Zumbi in Brazil, but the first free black territory was started around 1600 by Binco, Biojo in Colombia, in a place called Palenque. And it's now a World Heritage Site. But you go there and they have a statue of Binco, but right across from Binco is a Catholic church with white figures. You've seen that, with the white figures in there. And I'm saying to the people, wait a minute, what is going on here? They were the ones who betrayed him. This church, this Catholic priest, they betrayed Binco. And actually, he was assassinated because of them. And you got a church right here across from the plaza where you have a statue of him. What kind of confusion is going on with the black people in Colombia? I say this to my brothers and sisters in Colombia because I love them. And the Vice President Francia Marquez, one of her good, actually her chief of staff is a good friend of mine, Yosef. And I'll say that to you, sir, Yosef, if you see this, you have to ask the question, why is that? And I ask that question because if you go and you look at the history of Colombia, they will tell you that there were black deities that were worshipped by the indigenous people in Colombia. They will even show you statues, these black statues of these people. And you say, oh my goodness, these are black people, what happened to them? And the Spanish priest, said, no, we cannot have these. And we cannot have the indigenous people, using these. And in fact, so the Africans followed the same pattern. But we all over, we have the same problem. But we're working on it. And that's what's so beautiful about what we're doing. And that's what's so beautiful about being a human being. It's in there.
Yeah, I wanted to ask a question about the Garifuna.
Yes.
How have they been able to maintain their customs and cultures without the infiltration of Eurocentrism?
That's a very good question. And I must tell you that when I was in Belize, I went to the Garifuna. I went to see the Garifuna in Belize. And one of the things that the Garifuna did, and they originally came from St. Vincent, but one of the things that they did, they made sacred their own adventure from St. Vincent to Central America. And they made that a sacred, it's almost like that is their pilgrimage to Honduras, to Belize, to all of those areas. They made this a sacred thing. So if you go to their worship, they still believe in the ancestors. And that to me is unique. I mean, it's a unique culture. And in fact, we had a doctoral student about 20 years ago, who did her doctoral dissertation on them. It was a very, very powerful culture. Thank you very much.
Oh, Asante for coming.
Sikutu.
Do you still teach at Morgan?
Temple,
you're at Temple.
My son teaches at Morgan.
Okay.
Yeah. And he still teaches there. Yeah, right.
So I happen to be, I came to Morgan in 1975, so I got a chance to have dialogue with the great Chancellor Williams.
Yes.
This is the time where Don L. Lee had not become Haki Mabudu.
That's right.
This is the time when we had Sonia Sanchez and Gwendolyn Brooks.
That's right.
And it was very African-centered,
Yes.
Morgan State.
Yeah.
Now we've lost it. And I would like to know a couple of things. What do you think we need to do to create the kind of mandatory study of every student that's a freshman that comes across our HBCUs to make sure that they are reading and have this history?
Do you work there?
No, I'm a graduate student of the School of Social Work.
Okay.
But it was your book, Afrocentricity, that I would argue, or Afrocentric with Jerome, I can't think of his last name.
Sheila.
And everybody would be like, Jima, we're studying Freud.
Right.
And this black thing that you keep coming from doesn't make any sense to us. So I would get ostracized for it.
Yeah.
Now it's all Afrocentric, or Afrocentricity. But I would like to know what you think about what would have to occur to get that to happen in HBCU. My second question would be, I've been to Ghana, like Bobby here, who is one of my fellow classmates, and he's been recently, in the last week or so, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And when I went there, the cab drivers, I'm wondering if this happened with you, all the taxi drivers had, I call white cellophane Jesus on the glove box.
That's right.
I mean, they don't, it's not just white Jesus.
That's right.
It's, if you're old enough, you remember that you used to have the pictures on the wall with Jesus where you see his heart.
Oh, wow.
And it would be purple.
That's
The
right.
back, right? Am I old enough?
Yeah.
So and so you would, and I would call it white cellophane Jesus.
That's it.
And they would shut down. I was in Neboy Townhouse Tension outside of Accra, and they would shut down on Sundays, and they would all put on their European clothes, and they would go to church. And the poorest of the poor, just like you said about the brother with the helicopter, the poorest of the poorest, even on top of the castle, I mean, they had people living. That is, I don't know if that's still happening, but they had people living on top of the castle.
Yeah.
So I don't know what it is that we need to do as Africans going back to get them to understand that this is not the right way to go. They're trying to whiten up Ghana in a way where the person who had won Miss Ghana, they have a lot of things with skin lightener. So Nivea had lightened up Miss Ghana, and they said take it down. So I would wonder, what would you say to my brothers and sisters? You met Brother Sam when you were there, and he's very, very Christian. And so we had to be polite. We just didn't get into that conversation. And the last thing is, I run a cultural arts program for youth in the summer, which is a summer camp called Woman, Working, Organizing, Making a Nation, and it's called Gia the Camp. one of my students, Bobby's daughter, Reagan, and now I'm putting her on the spot, but we're going to be doing a cultural kind of cotillion in the next year or so. So I would like to know what you would think should be in it. What should they learn over the course of the year before they graduate into being presented to the community? So those are my questions. I'm sorry.
Well, you've asked questions that will keep us here for another 2 hours. Let me try quickly. The first observation you made is absolutely correct. We all who've been to Ghana, we see this, we understand that. But I tell you, it doesn't matter where in Africa you go. If you go to Zimbabwe, you'll see the same thing. It's the Christian influence and evangelical influence is taking over many countries. And where they are not taking, where the evangelicals are not taking it over, then the Muslims are taking it over. So that's going to be the ultimate struggle of Islam and Christianity, would be on the African continent, and African traditions are basically being smothered out by both of these invasions of Africa. That's what I see. And now what can they do? And of course they're listening to us. Apparently, because this is going to be on YouTube. So I'll tell you what they should do. The first thing they need to do is to close down all indications that God is white. They need to stop that all over Africa. There's no sense in that, because what that does is basically give children the idea that they should attain some notion of whiteness in order to be correct and right and righteous and so forth. That is totally out. And I don't know whether they can have legislation to do it, or whether the president can do it, whether the churches can do it, or whatever. That's the first thing that they need to do. And the second thing that I think they need to do in order to try to get this correct in Africa is to have much more Afrocentric, many more Afrocentric classes and curricula in the colleges and universities. They've got to do this, and this battle has to be fought. And you are Afrocentrics, so you got to fight this battle. And you can't you got to fight it with the Christians, and you got to fight it with the Muslims. We have to fight the battle. What I've seen is that the battle has to be engaged, because if it's not engaged, we're losing. Africa is losing, and the other people are winning. You got to engage them. You got to question it. You have to ask yourself, why should it be that this young sister believes that somehow straightening her hair and lightening her skin with bleach is better than her own beautiful skin and hair that she already has naturally? Why should this be? You got to question her on that. You got to engage in that. So that's one of the things. I mean, there are many other things that we can say and go on with. But the second question, we had in the 60s, as you know, because you mentioned all the people, Sonia Sanchez and Hakeem Adabudi and Gwendolyn Brooks and so on. So what do we have? We had rites of passage. So for the young women that you're going to be working with, there were certain things. I mean, I even wrote a rite of passage. It was called Mufundala, and which is really still available somewhere in some of my writings. But what do we say? They ought to learn, for example, who their own personal ancestors are. So you're going to have them to come and stand before an audience and say, my ancestors, as far as I remember in this country, were these. Have them to do 6 generations. If they can come up with 6, we may not be able to come up with 6 generations, but if they can't come up with 6 generations, have them also to know certain women of ancient African history. Bring those women in, so that they know Nzinga, and they know Yaninga of Burkina Faso, that they know these traditions that come out of Africa, of the great queens from the Kushite dynasties. I mean, have them to be able to recite to you that they know these things. Have them to know Harriet Tubman. Have them to know Sojourner Truth. Have them, if they're going to have this cotillion, you may want to call it something else, but if they're going to have something like that, you know, if they're going to have something, they're going to have something. I mean, no, I don't know what it means, but I have an idea of what it is. But have them to demonstrate. Now, this is, all traditions do this. If you go to a bat mitzvah, that's what they do. That's what they do. I've been to bar mitzvahs, and I've seen they have the young people come and they demonstrate what they know about Jewish culture and Jewish history. And they do it for a whole hour. You know, and you got to recite something. Let them recite the poetry from Gwendolyn Brooks and Sonia Sanchez. Let them, let them tell something from Zora Neale Hurston and Tony Cade Bambara and Mari Evans and so forth. Give them, let them show you that they have a robust interest in African culture. You see? That's what I would say. I know I can go on, but this is enough.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Can I steal one? I got a short one.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You. I mean, how can we deny you? You brought us here, brother. What can we do?
But this. I mean, I got so many questions. We won't talk about comedy today. Check me out on YouTube, and I talk about it.
All right.
But look, this is the question I had. I think I'll be remiss if I don't express that this book has caused some controversy within some of our African-centered or Afrocentric communities.
Okay.
And I mean, and I was at the on the target for something.
Yes.
And even as the sister Dr. spoke about earlier, as far as neurological things that's happening.
Yes.
Right? So when I hear talk about neurological pathways and synapses and all these different things happening that cause this trauma and all the traumas in the body, right? So we understand that some of what's going on and what's being said in this book is having visceral responses. People having visceral and reactive responses to.
Yes.
And much of that is this idea of race. And I haven't made it all the way through the book, but I've read maybe several chapters and I'm going back over it again. And the section that she read, so we talk about getting rid of the language or what have you, and then we also use the language. And then you also understand in social sciences we use the language. Then like if you take the word, I don't know exactly what you mean by it, but I want to know what you mean by it. I mean, I have an idea what you might mean by it, but it's kind of hard. You know, as even as me is doing experiments and studies, and I'm using the word black and African American, and so what does that really mean? And could you speak to these visceral responses, these traumatic responses our people are having to it?
Do you want to talk? You want me to talk? Okay.
And I'll
right,
talk after you.
So here's what I can say is that in the creative world, first of all, in the social science world, the one thing that social scientists do, all of us who are in some way or another part of the social science world, what we do is we observe realities and then we create different concepts to explain those realities. But of course, if we discover through research that the particular reality does not exist, then we've just created a theory. And this is based on general theory. I mean, I don't want to get too deep on it, but it's like the key for the social scientist is the physical scientist. And so the physical scientists, the top of the physical scientists are the physicists. Now, what do the physicists do? The physicists, nobody knows what the universe is, except that we can realize that there are 100 billion suns out there, just like our sun, right? So what do? They theorize, and they come up with ideas, and then they try to test those ideas. So one of the things that they used to do when I was a kid, and this was a long time ago, we used to talk about ether. Have you ever heard the word ether? They don't talk about ether anymore. It doesn't exist. But they thought it existed. And so everything was ether. You know, the whole universe is made up of ether. So, right? And now they got your oxygen, hydrogen. But it was ether. It was a concept. Race was created by Europeans. Actually, it was created by the Hindu first. And then they talked about caste, which is essentially part of what the Europeans took with this notion of race. It's a created thing. It's just like we can sit, like in here now, 20 people, we can come up and we can get a classification that will identify maybe all of us, with the exception of 4 or 5 of us, as being of a different race. We can do that. We can just sit there, right? Say, this is what you have to have, this is what you have to have, this is what you have. So, and we say, okay, we all got it, you don't have it. You can do that. And you can say that we're going to call that whatever you want to call it. You give it a name. Race, that's how they create. Race doesn't exist automatically. There's no such thing. It didn't fall out of the sky and say, oh, there's these races. No. What happened, African people always knew from the very beginning that there were different phenotypes. We always knew that. But what did Europe do with the phenotype? I mean, it's like, you can imagine that there were African, since Africa was the origin of humanity, we knew that there were tall people and short people. There were people of light complexion, dark complexion. We knew that. But what Europe did was to rank those differences. You see? And when they ranked those differences, that's what created race. By ranking the differences, you now have said, when I see a short person, that's an inferior person. You know, when I see that kind of person, that person has this. And then of course, your mind, mentally, you say, oh, that's a short person. Oh, he's inferior. You begin to, so this how race is insidious into everything. And so now the police on the street, when the police sees a black person, ranking, that's an inferior person. You see? So this is why we say, well, they wouldn't go into a house and shoot a white woman in the face like they did that black woman. Why wouldn't they? They wouldn't, because they have already ranked it. You see? So this is why we say that the concept itself is elusive. And we write about that. And we say, but that doesn't mean that we don't fight for African people. We fight for African people because African people are the most oppressed people. And we fight for all oppression. In fact, as I told my children, we call upon our ancestors far and near, mother of our mothers, to render mercy and bear witness for the liberty and freedom and liberation of all oppressed people. All oppressed people, wherever they are in the world. If it's Palestinians, I'm for their liberation. If it's for Jewish people oppression in Russia, I'm for their liberation. I'm for all oppressed people to be liberated. But in my case, in the United States of America, I have to talk about African people being liberated first. You see, fundamentally. But I don't promote that as some notion that there's a hierarchy in all of this oppression or a hierarchy in all. No, all oppressed people. Because there's only one human being. A human race is Homo sapien. That's all. Thank you. Thank you, brother. Appreciate you. Okay.
Do you want me to say something?
You want to say? Go ahead.
Yes.
Well,
Well,
go to
in
the
this
bathroom.
ranking, that I want to go to.
Go ahead. You
But
speak.
in this ranking of humanity, the racialization of humanity, as we argue, it's not real. It's never been proven by all the people that have tried to say that it's genetically so. And it's never been proven by all those who try to say through religion that it is biologically so. or in terms of morally so or immorally so. None of these are true. They're all stories to create these hierarchies. And within these hierarchies of white, yellow, red, brown, and black, all the women are below the men, except the white woman is above all the men and the women. So she has a special position, even though she's inferior to the man. And I just want to, we can see how that plays out. So, I'm just adding that little bit so that you understand the patriarchal aspect of this and the significance of culture to analysing, because chronologically we can see developments of culture changing. So even though we're using the two cradle theory and essentially two cultures, we also recognise that there are cultures, many thousands of cultures all over the world, but what we recognise is the similarity in those cultures. So across Africa, we can recognise different cultures because there are different divinities and so on, but they're essentially very, very similar. So, and Europeans obviously knew that, and so do Arabs, but Europeans obviously knew that when they conquered the whole of Africa and divided it into all these different sections. But it was already conquered in the north in different sections. So it's something that people subscribe to, similarities in culture, but they don't want to be told they have similar cultures, which is what Job did. And, and then Africans protest that we're all different cultures, but you have similar, you love the ancestors, you love your children, you place women in respectful positions. All these things are similar across Africa. And then those little divisions like patrilineal and matrilineal, it's always important in any of those, where is the mother? Mm-hmm. That's the critical piece. And if she's disrespected, whether it's, it can only be, patriarchal, but whatever line of descent and heritage that creates the debasement of the woman who is the potential mother, that's how civilization, patriarchy, etc. And, so that's just to add to accepting that there are many cultures, but the two are based on the relationship of the creators of the culture and life.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank y'all. Give up Dr. Asante, Dr. Nada, a round of applause, y'all.
Thank y'all. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for coming out. And then sign some books if you get books. And I appreciate all the questions, all the participation. And I'd like to just add something that's in Afrocentricity, because a lot of people say, look, Dr. Asante changed up. When he said, the way he answered, he said, well, I'm against all forms of oppression. And they said, well, he changed up, now he's inclusive. But I said, well, you're right, you said Afrocentricity is the book that you found when you became familiar with Dr. Asante on, and it's in there. He said it's against all forms of oppression. All forms. He has it listed out and all those things. There's one thing I wanted to say, but I just lost it.
But
it says all forms of oppression, and it's for the liberation of black people, by extension, the world.
Yes. I appreciate you for saying that.
Yes.
Because here's the thing, and I say this, where's the?
I'm not on video.
My man got you.
My name and several of them you can have.
Okay, cool. Then I got one for myself.
I'll just sign a few of them just to And what's your name?
My name is Charmaine.
All right.
A-H. Get
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Thank you.
All right, one.
Get your mind back. When you claim your Africanness, you're gonna get your mind back. Black and I'm proud. Black and I'm proud. Claim your Africanness. Black and I'm proud. I'm telling you. When you claim your Africanness, you're gonna get your mind back. Black and I'm proud. Claim your Africanness. Black and I'm proud. I'm telling you. When you claim your Africanness, you're gonna get your mind back. Black and I'm proud. Claim your Africanness. Black and I'm proud. I'm telling you. Become a part of it. Embrace it. 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 When you claim your Africanness, you're gonna get your mind back. Black and I'm proud. Claim your Africanness. Black and I'm proud. I'm telling you. When you claim your Africanness, you're gonna get your mind back. Black and I'm proud. Claim your Africanness. Black and I'm proud. I'm telling you.